one person that had no qualms about, maybe not going along with FDR's, New Deal and not necessarily buying, his restructuring of how things should be, was Father Charles Coughlin. What do you know about Father Charles Coughlin?
I know that he originated from the Shrine of the Little Flower over on Woodward Avenue.
Yeah.
And the reason I know about that is because I had a client who had a radio studio up there when they owned one of the Detroit area radio stations. And I was among the engineers who helped to build that. And I think I was up there when they did a few broadcasts from the Shrine of the Little Flower. And that was eerie. That was a scary place. So I can imagine what it was like back in the day when.
What do you mean eerie? Talk to me about that. That's interesting to me.
It was just, that facility is filled with mazes of rooms that go everywhere. And it was hard to find the studio if you didn't know exactly where it was. It was just like an area from where they did the preaching, and almost like a mini cathedral, a stadium of sorts. And that's where he did his broadcasts. And it was just, it just felt eerie. It was almost like I could feel what went on decades and decades ago, because it was dimly lit and a lot of dark wood everywhere.
Wow. So there was was it like a doomy dark? I mean, because that's pretty specific.
Almost. Let's put it that way. And then the people I was doing work for, they were a great religious group. They were Catholics, but they were extremely dedicated to what they were doing, and that combined with the atmosphere of what was going on there and what had gone on there maybe 50, 60 years ago or whatever. And it was the same structure. Once you get inside, it was just, it changed your mood once you got in there.
Yeah. And a lot of people know who Father Charles Coughlin is, and a lot of people don't. And for those who don't, Father Coughlin was arguably the first celebrity that was spawned from radio, because he went on WJR 760, yep. WJR in Detroit, and I think he started in 1929. I think I'm right about that. But he went on the air to protest a burning cross that was placed on the church. I mean, that's why he started his broadcast. I mean, that was the whole reason why he went to the airways. Well, eventually, he was like 35 million people a week around the country were listening to Father Charles Coughlin, and he grew into he had this huge following, but somewhere along the line, he became kind of an anti-Semite. He became a Hitler apologist, but even still, right. He was a very polarizing figure. In fact, WJR became they started WJR, the Goodwill station. That became to offset all the negative pub that they were getting because of, his anti-Semitic rhetoric. And but right. Here's the thing. Here's what's interesting about it. When he was on the radio, FDR actually invited him to the White House because he thought, he's, kind of like they can benefit one another. But eventually they had a falling out, and it became so heated. But before we go any further, here's a clip of Father Charles Coughlin where he's denouncing FDR's New Deal. Check this out.
And therefore choosing right instead of might, choosing to be on the side of justice instead of on the side of modern capitalism with its intermingling with socialism and communism, I stand before you tonight to warn you, careless of what the future holds to me, that this relief that has failed to relieve, by pounding up its taxation, by doubling its assessment upon the payrolls of the nation, by finding its way into the grocer shops where you purchase your food, this relief that lives upon suckers, taking from the people every penny they own, is due to crumble and fall before 1 year from this April. You think you know what depression is? You people living on the WPA envelopes. WPA envelopes filled partly from the money confiscated from industry and commerce and from the envelopes of those who are working. How long can that last? It can't last forever. There's no bottomless pit to that spending. You WPA workers and those of you who are living upon the dole system, how long can it last for this Federal Reserve Bank to invent and coin and issue its own bogus money against the debts of a nation, and then when the bond market drops as it's dropping now, print more fresh $5 bills to buy in its own bonds? Oh, there's a law of compensation, and there's an accounting to be held, an accounting that shall make the Depression of 1929 seem as a prosperity.
Hanging by the edge of their speaker cones.
Right? You know, it's interesting because coming up, you know, the FDR's New Deal was taught to us in school as a good thing. But doing this documentary, I realized that not everybody liked it. And
right,
some people were vocal against it. But Father Coughlin, I think him and FDR, you know, just made perfect enemies. It was the first, you know, the first Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant, if you will, the first political battle, and I think people forget about that sometimes. That was a very heated political feud that went on between those two. But yeah, again, much like we were talking earlier, there's no video. This is where you're getting your news and information, and when you hear these things on the radio, what goes through your mind as someone who might have been listening in the 30s?
It had to be really, really intense. I mean, you know, much more serious than the Jack Benny, Fred Allen feud, because that was all put on, and that was just for laughs. Well, this was hardcore, serious news type stuff, and this wasn't a drama or a scripted play. This was reality. This was life.
People forget this, but, you know, before the World War II started, there was about 6 months ago, Bob, I went down this rabbit hole where I was looking at old photos. That there's someone that makes a video just showing old photos. Some of them have celebrities on them, some of them not. You know, like there might be a picture of I think there's a picture of Gwen Stefani meeting Sting as a teenage girl. Not Sting a teenage girl, but Gwen is a teenage girl. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And then they'll show like a picture of the Hoover Dam or something. So, and then they put music behind it. But one of the pictures I came across was an arena, and I think it was, I can't remember what city it was in, but it was a major U.S. city that was full of Nazis in America, and it was like a stadium filled with 20,000 plus. So like pre-World War II, I mean, when Hitler started doing the crap he did during the war, people like saw through that. But before all that happened, there was a huge Nazi movement in the United States that people forget about. And the good and the bad and the ugly, you know, Father Coughlin was kind of the genesis of that, no?
Yes, that is true. That is true. He was he was kind of a radio icon in his time, and you know, he wasn't mainstream like a Robert Trout or an Edward R. Murrow. He was a polarizing figure, kind of, as you were saying earlier.